So, hi everyone! Today I'm joined by Adriana. Hi Adriana!
Hi everyone!
And we're going to talk about crayfish. And those of you who follow our updates closely might remember that Adriana made a post quite recently about this project and about our new partnership. But now we're going to go more into detail about it. So maybe you could start by telling us what this project is about and how we ended up being in this project.
Yes, so this project we're doing in partnership with Rewilding Apennines. We started to talk about this idea a while back. It was Tiago who was looking for a new project that we could support. And one of our other partners basically recommended Rewilding Apennines for us to reach out to. And so we did. And we started to talk about potential projects that require funding, and basically narrowed it down to this crayfish reintroduction project that we found to be very interesting and impactful, and it was something that Rewilding Apennines were looking for funding. Basically, the idea behind the project is to breed and reintroduce endangered European native crayfish, specifically the white-clawed crayfish, which has been in decline all over Europe and disappeared from many areas in Central Apennines. And Rewilding Apennines did a feasibility study and identified a few rivers where the habitat is good enough and the threats are not present. So it's a good opportunity to basically bring this species back. And so our aim is to support basically the restocking or the return of the species to one of these rivers in this region.
Okay. So you mentioned threats, that there are some threats that this species is facing and that has caused the decline. Could you explain a bit more what that is?
Yes, so the biggest threat to native crayfish, so we have 6 native crayfish in Europe, and all of them are facing similar threats. And the biggest one is this plague. It's called the crayfish plague, which is caused by a fungus that's spread by non-native crayfish that were introduced into our native ecosystems from North America. So now in Europe we have around 10 of these non-native crayfish, mainly from North America, but some also from Australia, I believe. And all of these species basically carry this disease that they themselves are immune to, but our native crayfish are not immune to. And these crayfish were introduced from America, brought by people and released into the water courses a long time ago. It started in the 1800s. People, before didn't have this knowledge that this introduced species, non-native species, can carry diseases that our native species are susceptible to, and people basically liked eating the crayfish, and they thought, oh, let's just put more crayfish in the rivers. It will be great for everyone. We'll have more to eat. But the result was quite the opposite, actually, and it caused a massive crash of the populations, and white-clawed crayfish have suffered the most. So this is probably the major reason behind the decline, but also it's combined with habitat loss. So like the way we alter rivers, the building of dams, building of embankments along the river beds, basically, and and the river banks mainly, where the crayfish burrow, you know, and that's their habitat. So if you take the riparian vegetation out and you put stones and concrete, the species loses its habitat basically. So habitat loss, also pollution. So it's a combination of factors that are leading to these declines. But the plague really has this potential to basically wipe out an entire population from an entire river within a few weeks, and the mortality rate is almost 100%. So once this plague is introduced into a river stream where native crayfish live, within a few weeks all of them are gone, more or less. Maybe a few individuals survive, but functionally basically the population is gone. What is interesting though is that this fungus without its host only survives for a few weeks in the stream. So basically once the plague is over, there is the potential to bring this species back, because the fungus basically disappears as the host disappears as well.
Yeah, that's amazing that the native species survived. I mean, if it's so potent, this fungus, so
it's been spreading across. Yeah, it's. I mean, they mainly survived in kind of isolated streams on top of the mountains, where maybe this non-native crayfish were not introduced, or they haven't moved up to these streams. But especially in Italy, lower downstream, you can't find native crayfish anymore. So most of them are the non-native crayfish, and the native crayfish have only survived in the higher areas in several streams. But the problem is that even here the plague can get, for instance, it can be brought by equipment. So like if somebody goes fishing lower downstream and then gets into the car and goes higher upstream where the native crayfish live, has the fungus on their wellies, on their boots, gets into the stream, and the fungus spreads. So a big part of the project will also be this communication campaign and awareness raising campaign with the people that live around these rivers where the reintroduction will take place. And yes, basically trying to raise awareness about the threats and how to stop the fungus from spreading.
That's great. Yeah. So this place where our project will be, it doesn't have non-native crayfish anymore.
No, it doesn't, and I don't believe it ever had. So the fungus was spread by contaminated equipment, basically, and the feasibility study looked at several river catchments and identified 3 rivers that have good habitat quality. The water is clean enough, so pollution was a big problem in the past, but now this is becoming increasingly better across Europe, because we have better water purification, or also there is less runoff from agriculture, especially in the higher areas, because people are abandoning traditional agriculture, and the use of pesticides also, thanks to EU legislation, etc. So actually the issue with the pollution is improving, and there are also river restoration efforts, so improving the overall habitat quality, and basically there are rivers and areas where the conditions are good enough to bring back this crayfish.
That's great. What about I know this isn't fully related to the project, but I think it's very interesting. These non-native species, is there a lot of them still around in Europe? Do you know?
I believe there are. Like there are a big problem now. People are realizing it, but it's almost unstoppable once these species are introduced. And not only that they are non-native, but they can be kind of classified as invasive alien. We talk about invasive species when they are spreading very fast, reproducing very fast, and they are more like opportunistic and generalist. So they can invade a lot of different types of habitats, and they are basically outcompeting the native species. So we see this with, for example, ladybugs across Europe, lots of different plants. There are a lot of examples of this. So we have a lot of non-native species in our ecosystems. You know, this is historically or with trade and you know, like people moving around and distributing species around the planet. But some of these species really, thanks to their ecology and thanks to their kind of a strategy of survival, they are very good at just surviving and thriving in different environments, right? And that's when we in ecology classify these species as invasive, because they have this potential to really dominate an ecosystem and push out the native biodiversity and really decrease the biodiversity of the native ecosystems. So yes, these species are present, but the focus is, you know, looking at the areas where these non-native crayfish are not present, where the habitat is in good state, and the native species can be brought back. You know, with a little bit of help, they could be thriving again in some refuges.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, that was a lot of background information, but very interesting. So what about our project then? What is going to happen in the project itself?
So we'll be setting up a breeding center for white-clawed crayfish. I tend to sometimes say white-tailed because a lot of species are called white-tailed something, and I have to be very careful always. Okay, this is the one with a claw. So we'll be setting up a breeding center next to this river, where the fungus has basically wiped out the entire population. So there are no native crayfish anymore, or any crayfish in this river. And this breeding center will basically supply the crayfish to introduce into this river, but also in other rivers in the region in the future.
Okay.
So we are basically supporting the establishment and the running costs of one of 3 breeding centers that Rewilding Apennines are setting up. And also, very interestingly, or what we really liked about this project is that it's quite like nice package. It's quite holistic. There is also a component of habitat protection. So we'll be also buying a piece of land where the river is naturally meandering, and especially during floods is creating this meander, which is great crayfish habitat because it's where the water runs a bit slower. You know, there's some sediment, some gravel where the crayfish burrow and hide, and is also creating this river bank where also, you know, the adults especially dig the burrows. And basically this came about because Rewilding Apennines, the team found out that the current owner was planning to put an embankment on this meander, so the river wouldn't be cutting into the land. But essentially, this would destroy the habitat. So we decided, okay, let's purchase this. It's a relatively small piece of the river, but in terms of the habitat qualities, it's really good, and it's important to not keep destroying the habitat and trying to protect it. So, and it's very close to the breeding center actually. So it will provide really good habitat for the animals that will be released into the river.
Yeah. So are we like funding this purchase, or is it purchased for Mossy Earth?
We are funding this purchase, so we are not going to be the owners of the land. It's going to be Rewilding Apennines, but we as we assessed, or we decided that it's an important component of the project. There, the opportunity was there, and we thought it's worthwhile funding, because it's no use to release this crayfish if into the river if the habitat will keep getting destroyed, right? And really,
so it
like,
makes it more sustainable.
It makes sense, and the state of the rivers is in many parts not the best. So where it is, we just really have to do the best to protect it, to protect the state, and to improve it.
Yeah, and I mean, then we can make sure that the state won't get worse, like that there will be a habitat also in the future for these crayfish if the land is purchased. Yeah.
And the kind of wider vision for this project is that that the crayfish will become sort of an ambassador for the rivers, and that once the conversation starts and people will start to be more aware about the problems of the rivers, and the degradation and the need for protection, and these species importance. Also the crayfish, like, historically was quite a culturally important species, because it was very abundant in the rivers and people used to eat it, and there are all sorts of traditional recipes, and so once basically this conversation starts happening again, and this memory of the old times comes back, because part of the communication campaign is also to go around the villages and collect all these traditional recipes connected to the rivers from the locals, especially the older generation that remember the rivers still abundant with fish and crayfish. The idea is that this will in the future lead into wider river restoration in the area. So having the crayfish as an ambassador basically for the rivers and for the health of the rivers.
That's great. So it's like a starting point for a bigger restoration.
Yes, it's like exactly like you say. It's a starting point for bigger restoration work, river restoration work. And the crayfish also is a very interesting species. Maybe we should also mention this.
Yeah.
This is also why we decided to choose this project, because although it's quite a small crustacean, in the scale of the river stream, it is very important. It acts as a keystone species, so it basically affects species up and down the food chain. So just by going around its daily business, like burrowing and eating and doing its thing, it's creating conditions for a lot of other species that live in the rivers. So for instance, it's omnivorous, so it eats both, it both hunts and it also eats vegetation. And by breaking down the aquatic vegetation, it basically makes it available for other species, especially some aquatic insects. So it basically creates food for other species, but it also itself is food for other species. So for instance, for otters or for birds. So it's quite an important component of the ecosystem, and also it has an important effect on the sediment flow in the rivers, because river, it's not just water, but it's also sediment and nutrients, and this all has to be in flow and in continuity. And again, by digging under the gravel and burrowing and like looking for food and shelter, the crayfish are actually making a lot of sediment turnover. So they are really like also ecosystem engineers on a level. And if we remove this effect of the crayfish from the river, it really kind of loses a big part of the dynamic that is important for the quality of the river, and also for all the other species that live there. So, bringing back this species will also create good conditions for a lot of other species.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And it supports even more the idea of this being a starting point, right? But yeah, so was there anything else that you wanted to mention about the project itself? Like what is happening in the project? There were all the three components, right?
Yes, so we have the habitat protection, we have the breeding center, we have the community engagement component. So yes, very nice, well-rounded project. It will run for around 2.5 years, and yes, I'm really excited to also learn more about it and learn more about the process and bring more updates. So yes, we will basically be starting next year with stocking the crayfish for the breeding center, and moving forward also with purchasing the land. So yes, very nice new project that has a big potential to be also impactful and open new doors in the future.
Okay, so what about the risks associated with this project? I mean, we talked about the plague, that the plague has been in this river before, and most likely because of contamination. Is there a risk of this kind of contamination happening again? Or are there any other threats that this project is facing?
I think the plague is always a risk, but hopefully, combined with the communication campaign, this will not be such an issue in the future. But of course, it's always a potential that someone unintentionally brings the plague back. But Rewilding Apennines are also working with other partners in the region that are controlling basically the spread of the plague. So hopefully, with these two efforts combined, will minimize the potential for the plague to come back, and especially into these reintroduction sites that will be monitored more closely.
Yeah.
So yes, so this is probably the biggest threat, and then also climate change is a big question mark, but that's for all conservation projects. And that's why it's very important to continue restoring habitats and restoring ecosystems, restoring nature in general, so that species have enough space to move, to colonize, to survive in, as the climate changes basically, and we don't know how this is going to play out. So that's why now more than ever I think it's very important to really focus on nature restoration.
Yeah, it keeps nature more resilient as well, right? If there is more diversity and healthier ecosystems.
Exactly. The more opportunities the species have, and the
Yeah. What about the vision for this project then? You said it's going to be 2.5 years. So if everything goes well and it's successful, what do you expect the result to be in 2.5 years, and what would it mean for the area or the ecosystem?
well, hopefully in 2.5 years we'll see that the population is back in the river and that it's thriving. Of course, there is going to be long-term monitoring to see, if more releases are necessary, or if the animals that are released within this 2.5 year period, basically, if they're thriving and if the population is increasing on its own, and then also looking at other river catchments that can be where the crayfish can be reintroduced. So it's a starting point, hopefully for wider reintroduction in the region of Central Apennines, and also that hopefully will open doors to river restoration efforts, like I said before.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that sounds amazing. So, did you have anything else you'd like to add at this point still?
I don't think so. I think we covered most of it.
Yeah.
It was a nice
People
discussion.
can always add comments and questions in the account, and then we'll try to answer all of them.
Yes, please do.
Yes, and there will be more information about this project in the project page as usual, and also updates, of course, coming after the work starts. And yeah, so keep an eye out for that, and until next time. Thank you, Adriana.
Yeah, thank you very much. Until next time.
Bye.
Ciao.